Hello, my name is Ahnaf and welcome back to the React for Beginners series. In this video, I'll be talking about component state in React. Now, the word state might make some people feel uncomfortable because it might sound intimidating, but to some people, okay? In this video, I'm going to be explaining how React component state works and how you can use it to basically make React render some data depending on a value in memory. So first of all, let me explain what state is. So in computing, state is basically a collection of data in memory, and the computer or the software does something depending on the data inside the state. So for example, think of the state as a variable. You have a variable, and then that variable has a value. So your computer or your program will do something depending on the value of that variable. In React, component states are similar. Your component has a type of variable, and we'll refer to that as state. Your component might have multiple state variables, and then your component will render something, or maybe make an API request, console.log something, like it'll just do something depending on the value inside the state. So in the last video, we have talked about how you can use props to render items inside, like render some data inside component. So we'll be using state management in this to-do list, but in today's video, since we're just covering basic state management, we won't need to use our to-do list example. We're just going to be using like a really simple button clicking example. So let's just do that, and we can probably make this inside another component. So let's save this, and then in our components folder, let's create something like button click .jsx, and now we could just do import react from react, and then just create a really simple code. So const button click equals to, and let's just return some JSX, and let's do export bold button click. So let's import this component over here, so we can do a line break, and then we could do something like import. Oh my god, my touch typing is really bad. Import button click from .slash button click. Now we can put this button click component here. As you can see, it shows nothing because we have nothing inside our component. And let's now make a really simple component here. So before we actually get into JavaScript like React state management, let's actually take a look at a vanilla JavaScript example. So I have this page over here, and basically this is really simple. If you are learning React, you should be able to understand this. I have this h1 with an ID called text, and I have this button which runs the increment function every time I click this. So in the h1, you see it doesn't have anything inside here, but we just change the value of the inside text to the value of number. Document.getElement by id text dot inner text equals to number. So the text inside here will be equals to number. So you can see over here it's 0 because number is 0 by default. And then you have this increment function. It basically just increments the number variable and then console.logs it. So we know that it has been incremented. So I hope you understand this code, and let's now click this and see what happens. If I click this, it shows the value of number, shows this, but even though we have set the value of this h1 to be equals to number, it's still not changing. And this is where it kind of gets confusing. You see, when JavaScript is being rendered for the first time, it's only being rendered once, okay? So even though you click this button, just because it has been rendered once, it doesn't render again. So if every time we used to click this and the JavaScript would render this page again, then it would reflect upon the change of state. So if the if the value of number is 1, then it would show 1. But since JavaScript is rendered once, so it only renders the initial value of number, and then it doesn't render again, regardless if the variable gets changed or not. It's only displayed once. Even if we spam click it, it's still gonna be 0. So this is where React state management comes in. Basically, even if you so if you click on a button and if you change the state, okay, so if you click on the button, it just increments the state value. It would still, it would render that component again, and that would show the state value. So let me actually show how you can do it. So over here, let's actually create an h1, and then we have an h1 here, and then a button. And let's have a br tag, and a button shows click me. Let's remove the example from here. And it doesn't show anything in h1 now. So now let's see how we can make a state variable. So a functional state variable in React, since we're using functional components, a state variable is considered as a hook. Now, we will talk about hooks in later videos, but hooks are basically a React feature that allows you to just look into events, so component lifecycle events. So you can just have a function which runs every time a specific lifecycle or function or a component event happens. So you can basically hook into those component events and then run a function or do whatever you want when those events are triggered. So let's import our state variable function. So import react comma, and now we use curly braces because the hooks are named variables or named exports. You can learn about named exports in JavaScript, like we're searching on Google or YouTube. But for named for named exports, you have to use curly braces. So use state, okay? Use and then capital S state. So this is the function that will allow us to make state variables. So in our component, we can make a constant const, and then now put 2 brackets, and then let's have our state variable. Let's call this number. And this useState function will give us 2 objects, or 2 return values. One is the state value, and the other is the function that will set the state. So you can't just do number equals to this. That won't work. That won't even render it. So for this, React gives you a function with the useState. Whenever you run useState, it gives you a state value as well as a function. So now let's call this function setNumber. So every time we run this function, we can use it to set the value of number, and then it will be equal to useState. And now let's give it an initial value. So number would be equals to 0 by default. So these are the variables over here. And now I want to render the value of number inside the h1. And as I've said in the last tutorial, you can use JSX and embed JavaScript code inside curly braces. So let's put number here, and boom, value is 0. Let's actually move the break line. You see, we have the value of number, and then we give it an initial value of 0, and now it's rendered over here. So now what I wanted to do is, whenever I click this, I wanted to change the value of number, and every time we change it, since this is a state variable, React will automatically show that. So we have this over here, and now we can attach an event. Okay, so I had an issue there, and it was basically something that I did. So in React, you have these events, so on click, and now in this event, I want to run this setNumber function. So to do this, we need to make an arrow function. So this will basically run this arrow function, and then inside these curly braces, we put the function here. So setNumber, and we want to set a value here. So see, we have to set a value, and we want to do number plus 1. So if the number is 0 and we add 1, it would be 1. And if the value of number is 2 and if we add 1, it's going to be 3. Save this and refresh. Now if we click, see the value of number changes. So basically what React is doing over here is, first of all, we are setting a state of value over here with the initial value of 0. So React is just displaying the number variable over here. And when we click this button, okay, it runs this set number variable. So we're just incrementing the number. And whenever this variable has been changed, whenever the state has been changed, React just detects that change in state and then just renders the JavaScript again. So it just renders this part and then it just shows the updated state value. So if we click this, and if we can just keep clicking it, it will just keep going. So now if you refresh, you see the state gets set to 0. Now you can have another function over here, okay, and we can just copy paste this, another button, and I want this to set to 0. So every time I click this, it will be set to 0. So set number equals to 0. And now I have click me and then set to 0. So if I just do this, and if I just increment it, and now I can set it to 0. If I click this, now back to 0. I could increase back to 0. And this is basically how you work with state in React. And it's really, really interesting because with state, you can do tons of stuff. So for example, we can make an API request, we can store that in the state, and then we would have a React component which will take those API data as a prop, and then that component will render some data from that API request, and it's just really fun with state management and stuff. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to subscribe to my channel and like this video, and I'll see you all in the next video.